Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Rena Sargentopoulos. Let's get right to your headlines. Some breaking news right now. President Trump is starting a 90-day pause on all retaliatory tariffs this afternoon, except for China, which he has now raised to 125%, up from 104% taxes that went into effect late last night. Just this afternoon, the White House press secretary says more than 75 countries around the world have reached out to the White House to start negotiating to lower those tariffs. Wall Street reacting almost immediately this afternoon. You can see the exact moment that President Trump made that announcement. The Dow shot straight up.
Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible.
It comes as the European Union approves a fresh set of import taxes on more than $24 billion worth of U.S. imports. Now, those will take effect on April 15th. Of course, China not taking the tariffs lightly, responding with new tariffs on American goods coming into their country starting tomorrow. Those taxes now at 84%, according to China's customs agency. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer in Beijing with a closer look.
China is showing no sign of backing down from an all-out trade war with the U.S. Officials here have announced even more countermeasures. 84% tariffs on U.S. imports, no longer the 34% they announced last week to match the latest round out of the U.S. So the gloves are off. And this is going to impact U.S. farmers, sending goods like soybeans and poultry to China, as well as some energy products. And there's talk of more to come, like a ban on Hollywood films and possibly cutting off talks on fentanyl cooperation. Tariffs on Chinese goods will hike the cost of everything from clothing and shoes to toys and electronics, all the things used in American homes. Also overnight, President Trump tripled duties to 90% on small packages that had been coming into the U.S. duty-free from retailers like Shein and Temu. President Trump has said that China wants to make a deal badly, but there's no indication here that Beijing even wants to talk, let alone line up with the dozens of other countries that are now looking to the White House for tariff relief. Janice Mackey-Frayer, NBC News, Beijing.
Across the South, storms have stopped for now, but intense flooding remains. Take a look at the Ohio River in Kentucky, pushed way past its banks in downtown Louisville. Right now, or during the recent storms, I should say, the western side of the state got more than 10 inches of rain, and the worst hit spots in the southwestern part of the state got nearly 16 inches. If you work at all at Southdale Mall or the hospital, your commute there is going to be a bit messy. The third construction project in the area is now underway. France Avenue south between 49th and Market is shutting down until Saturday. A Minneapolis city councilor tells us it is for a private development project. Keeping an eye on detour signs will be your guide through this part of town. So you definitely want to make sure that you already know about the E-line construction that is happening north on 44th and Abbott, plus some sewer repair to the south at 54th and Xerxes. Happening right now, diversity and equity and inclusion believers in Minnesota fighting back. Earlier this year, the Trump administration told public schools to cut their DEI programs or lose money. Then, as Ian Russell reports, the Minnesota Department of Education commissioner made a choice.
In the Fridley public school system, crunch time feels just a bell away.
This is the time in public education across the United States that we do our budgets.
Approvals for those are needed in the next few months, and like many districts, there's a lot to consider.
It's about ensuring that their needs are met.
For Superintendent Brenda Lewis, that includes federal dollars, a mainstay for a district of roughly 3,000 students.
70% of our students are living in poverty that we know.
In total, the district gets more than $1 million from the federal government to help support their learners. It's roughly 7% of Fridley's budget. If those funds go away, Lewis puts it simply,
It's unconscionable. Really it is.
And right now, not impossible. The U.S. Department of Education sent this letter out in February outlining that discrimination based on race, color, or national origin is illegal. That letter, written by Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Craig Traynor, goes on to say that educational institutions have toxically indoctrinated students and that institutions that fail to comply with federal civil rights law may face potential loss of federal funding.
I don't think the timing of that letter was not intentional.
The U.S. DOE then sent this memo on April April 3rd, requiring certification from state or local education agencies that they follow Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and not use DEI programs to advantage one's race over another. Continued use of those programs would see the elimination of federal funding.
I knew in my mind that letter was coming, but you feel it in your heart when it arrives.
Minnesota Department of Education, or MDE Commissioner Willie Jett, sent this letter saying it served as the department's response. Jett says that this looks to change the terms and conditions of federal financial assistance given to MDE without formal administrative process, and that the U.S. Department of Education doesn't have the authority to unilaterally overrule the will of Congress.
And I see my students in Fridley Public Schools represented in his points that he made in that letter.
Lewis says the state's pushback does give her pause, now unsure if those federal dollars will be around.
Does it give me worry as a superintendent? Yes, it does. However, I am far less worried given the board that I have the pleasure of serving, as well as working in the state of Minnesota. I think other states, it's just a different reality.
5 Minnesota sheriff's departments have joined a task force to help federal immigration officers. According to the ICE website, the sheriff departments in Cass, Crow Wing, Freeborn, Itasca, and Jackson counties signed a cooperation agreement with the federal agency. There are 3 different types of agreements that local law enforcement agencies can sign, allowing them to perform some immigration enforcement. One local immigration attorney does express some concern.
People who are immigrants who may have been victims of crime or may have been witnesses to crime may feel less willing or less safe to report those crimes. And so there is an attendant sort of potential public safety consequence.
Julia Decker with the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota says adding these counties to the list doesn't necessarily mean residents will see more immigration activity or more enforcement. She says law enforcement agencies may be taking advantage of new training opportunities that were recently approved by the president's executive order. New today, the FAA's head of air traffic is retiring early, and the agency is making sweeping changes to leadership at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. The changes are in part because of the deadly mid-air collision over the Potomac River in January. They're also part of federal buyouts throughout the Department of Transportation. New leadership at Reagan, according to the FAA, will be responsible for reviewing safety data at the airport, preventing incidents and near misses, and training employees to meet national standards.
I answered a call, and it was a woman telling me a plane fell out of the sky.
For the first time, we are hearing a powerful account from a Hennepin County dispatcher about that terrifying emergency in a Brooklyn Park neighborhood. A small plane crashed, killing a U.S. bank executive, but thankfully and amazingly, no one else was hurt. Jessica Hart shares how dispatchers handle these kinds of situations to get help where it's needed and fast.
When a plane crashed into this Brooklyn Park home,
911.
Jamie Bierling had seconds to react,
I actually was the first person to enter a call for the airplane.
alerting fire and police.
You never know what you're going to get.
Alongside her colleague Stephanie McNeil.
All of a sudden I hear ringing that just keeps going, so I look over at my phone screen, and at that point we probably had about 18 to 20 911 lines lit up.
More calls than people working.
You have to triage and prioritize the information that you're getting.
85 calls in 5 minutes is ridiculous. On an average day of 12 hours, I take 85 to over 100, but that's over 12 hours, not 5 minutes.
I was usually on the phone with somebody for maybe 15 to 20 seconds if they didn't have any additional information other than the plane hit the house.
Hennepin County Dispatch.
In this line of work, seconds count.
It's critical. Without us, it's life or death. If there isn't anyone sitting in these consoles, no one gets started.
In a moment of crisis, these women don't panic.
It's kind of something where you compartmentalize what the calls are and you can't react emotionally to them.
I am here to be a conduit to help the people calling, and they are my community. So being able to do this job is so immensely rewarding.
So they'll continue to answer your calls.
When did it happen?
Because they know seconds could be the difference between life and death.
Kind of don't think, just do it.
As unusual as this call was, they weren't fazed.
I have the immense privilege of talking to people in their worst moments and being that calm, steady voice to get them through it.
A 74-year-old woman who had been missing for days in Michigan was found alive in a heavily wooded area on Sunday, thanks to a sheriff's drone. The Mason County Sheriff's Office says Nancy Bloomquist hadn't been seen since she left a casino Thursday. The Sheriff's Office said Bloomquist got lost, and then her vehicle broke down and caught fire. She managed to get out and started walking to look for help, but forgot her phone in the car. Bloomquist said she had laid down next to a tree to seek shelter from the rain on Thursday night. She said she became so cold that she couldn't get back on her feet on Friday. She laid on the ground until that drone spotted her Sunday evening. There was little to no cell phone service in the area, but the drone team was able to connect its drone to Starlink satellites. Stay with us. More news and weather coming up after the break.